I was in my early 20s, working a dead-end office job and living in a cheap apartment on the outskirts of town. It was one of those places that was affordable for a reason. The building was old, the walls were thin, and it was bordered by a dense patch of woods that always seemed a little too dark, even during the day. This happened on a Tuesday night. I remember because Tuesdays were my late nights at the office, catching up on paperwork. It had been drizzling all day, but by the time I finally clocked out around 10 p.m., the heavens had opened up. It was a full-blown thunderstorm, the kind where the rain comes down in solid sheets and you can see 5 feet in front of your car. The drive home was a nightmare. The windshield wipers couldn't keep up, and every flash of lightning made me jump. My apartment complex was at the end of a long, poorly lit road that snaked alongside the woods. When I finally pulled into the parking lot, there was only one other car there, which wasn't unusual for that time of night. I grabbed my bag, pulled my jacket over my head, and made a run for the main entrance. Our building had a key fob system, but the lock on the heavy glass door was notoriously finicky. You had to pull it just right for the mechanism to catch. As I fumbled with the door, a flash of lightning lit up the entire area. In that brief, brilliant moment, my eyes were drawn to the edge of the woods. I saw a man standing there, who was just standing partially obscured by the trees, looking toward the building. He was wearing a drenched, dark green raincoat, the hood pulled low over his face. The sight of him sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold rain. He was too still. Another lightning flash and he was gone, or at least I couldn't see him anymore. I told myself it was just someone taking a shortcut through the trees, or maybe I'd imagined it. The storm was making me jittery. Finally, the lock clicked, and I stumbled inside, shaking the water from my jacket. My apartment was on the 3rd floor, at the very end of the hall. The hallway lights flickered erratically, buzzing in time with the thunder outside. As I walked, I couldn't shake the image of the man in the woods. Every shadow looked like a person. I finally made it to my door, unlocked it, and stepped inside, locking and deadbolting it immediately. I dropped my keys on the counter and leaned against the door, my heart still racing. That's when I heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping. It was coming from my living room window. Tap, tap, tap. Slow and deliberate. It was a 3rd floor apartment, no balcony, no fire escape, nothing outside that window, but a sheer drop to the muddy ground below. The storm was loud, but this sound was different. It was close. I crept toward the living room, my body frozen with a kind of fear I'd never known. Thank God. But the tapping continued. Tap, tap, tap. It was patient, methodical. Whatever was making that sound was right outside my window. 3 stories up. I didn't know what to do. Calling the police seemed insane. What would I even say? There's a noise at my window. They'd think I was crazy. I backed away slowly, my eyes fixed on the blinds, expecting to see a hand or a face push through at any second. I spent the entire night huddled in my bathroom, the door locked, listening to the thunder and the rain. The tapping eventually stopped toward. Maybe it was just drowned out by the storm, I don't know. I never saw the man again, and I moved out 2 months later. But sometimes when it rains really hard at night, I can still hear it. That soft, patient tapping on the glass. This took place when I was about 17. My dad was a long-haul truck driver, so he was gone for weeks at a time, leaving just me and my mom at home. We lived in a rural part of Ohio, surrounded by cornfields and not much else. Our house was a loaded 2-story farmhouse that had been in my mom's family for generations. It was the kind of house that groaned and settled at night, full of noises you had to get used to. One night in late August, a massive storm system rolled through. It was the tail end of a hurricane that had made its way up the coast, and it hit us hard. The wind howled like a wounded animal. The rain was so heavy it sounded like someone was throwing buckets of gravel against the house. Around midnight, the power went out. It wasn't a surprise. It happened all the time out where we lived. My mom lit a few candles and we sat in the living room, listening to the storm rage outside. She was never scared of storms and tried to make me feel the same way, but I always hated them. The feeling of being cut off from everything was what got to me. After an hour or so, my mom decided to go to bed. She told me to make sure the back door was bolted, which I did, and then she headed upstairs. I wasn't tired, The adrenaline from the storm was keeping me wide awake. I decided to stay downstairs and read by candlelight. Our house had a cellar. The entrance was a heavy wooden door in the kitchen floor. It was a creepy old cellar with stone walls and a dirt floor, and we only used it for storage or during tornado warnings. Always kept it locked from the outside with a heavy iron slide bolt. As I sat there reading, I started to hear a noise over the din of the storm. It was a scraping sound, faint at first, but persistent. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just the wind rattling something loose outside. But it didn't sound like it was coming from outside. It sounded like it was coming from inside the house, from below me. I put my book down and listened. Scrape, drag, scrape. It was coming from the kitchen. My blood ran cold. I stood up and walked quietly to the kitchen doorway. The only light was the flickering candle I held in my shaking hand. I peered into the darkness, my eyes fixed on the cellar door in the middle of the floor. The scraping sound was louder here. It was unmistakably coming from the cellar, and then I saw it. The iron bolt on the door was slowly and possibly sliding open. Inch by inch, it was being pushed from the other side. Something was in our cellar trying to get out. I was paralyzed. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. My mind went blank with terror. The bolt slid all the way back with a final metallic click. And then, slowly, the heavy wooden door began to lift. It opened just a crack, and a sliver of profound, absolute blackness appeared. I saw a hand emerge from the gap. It wasn't a normal hand. It was pale and slick, with fingers that were too long and thin like the legs of a spider. They clawed at the floorboards, trying to get a grip to push the door open further. That's what finally broke my paralysis. I screamed. I turned and ran, dropping the candle and plunging the house into darkness. I sprinted up the stairs yelling for my mom. I burst into her room and she shot up in bed asking what was wrong. I could barely get the words out. Ty just sobbed and pointed downstairs. She grabbed a heavy mag light from her nightstand and we crept to the top of the stairs together. She shined the powerful beam down into the first floor. Everything was still. We made our way down, my hand clutching her nightgown. When we got to the kitchen, she pointed the light at the cellar door. It was closed, and the iron bolt was slid firmly shut, just as it always was. She checked it, pulling on the door, but it was locked tight. She told me I must have had a nightmare, that the storm was playing tricks on me. I wanted to believe I really did, but I know what I saw. We never spoke of it again, but for the rest of the time, I lived in that house. I never once set foot in the kitchen alone after dark. I work as a paramedic. You see a lot of things in this line of work, things you can't unsee. The calls you remember the most are the quiet ones. The ones that happen on nights when the whole world seems to be holding its breath. This call came in about 3 years ago during a nasty November storm. It wasn't just rain, it was that freezing, sleet-like rain that coats everything in a thin layer of ice. My partner Dave was driving. We were heading back to the station after a routine call when dispatch came over the radio. It was a welfare check, an automated alert from a medical alarm company. Some old woman named Elisa May had pressed her panic button, but was in T responding on the two-way system. The address was way out in the sticks, down a series of winding country roads that were already becoming treacherous. It took us nearly 40 minutes to find the place. It was a small, dilapidated house set way back from the road, almost swallowed by overgrown trees. There were no lights on inside. It looked abandoned. We pulled up the gravel driveway and got out. The rain was coming down hard now, and the wind was bitter cold. "Feels spooky," Dave muttered, pulling a large flashlight from the ambulance. I just nodded, a familiar sense of unease settling in my stomach. We knocked on the front door. "Ambulance? Eliza May? Are you okay in there?" We shouted. No response. Just the sound of the rain and the wind whistling through the trees. The protocol for a non-responsive welfare check is to find a way in. We not cops we can just break the door down, but we have to make every effort to get to the patient. We walked around the house, shining our lights on the windows. They were all dark and grimy. The back door was unlocked. Dave and I exchanged a look. That's never a good sign. We pushed the door open slowly. "Ambulance? Anybody home?" He called out into the darkness. The air that drifted out was stale and cold, carrying a faint, sweet smell like old perfume and decay. We stepped inside. Our flashlights cut through the oppressive darkness, revealing a house cluttered with a lifetime of possessions. Stacks of old newspapers, trinkets on every surface, furniture draped in white sheets like tiny ghosts. It was eerily quiet, the storm outside feeling a million miles away. We cleared the first floor, room by room. Kitchen, living room, a small den. No sign of Elisa May? Upstairs? I said, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. The stairs creaked under our weight. There were 2 rooms on the second floor, a bathroom and a bedroom. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. As we got closer, the sweet smell became stronger. Dave pushed the door open, and we shined our lights inside. That's when we saw her. She was sitting in a rocking chair by the window, facing away from us, looking out at the storm. She was perfectly still. Ma'am, Eliza May? It's the paramedics, Dave said softly. She didn't move. We approached cautiously. I reached out to touch her shoulder. She was ice cold. It was obvious she had been gone for a while. Hours at least. We did the official check, of course. No pulse. No respiration. Dave went to radio it in. As per procedure, I had to look around the room for any prescriptions or a DNR order. Her medical alert panic button lay on the floor beside her chair. As I bent down to pick it up, my light fell across something else on the floor. It was a second teacup, sitting on a saucer next to an empty chair that was positioned directly opposite Eliza's. The cup was still half full, and there were wet, muddy footprints on the floor. They led from the hallway into the room, circled the empty chair, and went back out into the hall. They didn't match our boots. They were smaller and they were bare. I followed the footprints with my flashlight beam. They went out of the bedroom, down the stairs, and stopped right in front of the back door that we had found unlocked. It was only then that I realized the sound of the rain had stopped. The storm had passed. But the silence inside that house was more terrifying than any storm I've ever been in. Someone else had been in that house when Eliza died. Someone had sat with her, and they had left just before we arrived. We never found out who it was. The police report just listed it as a natural death. But I know what I saw. Someone pressed that panic button, and it wasn't Eliza May.